On August 27, 1883, the Earth made what many call the loudest sound in recorded history. People heard it 3,000 miles away. Its pressure wave was recorded 7 times as it circled the globe. This was Krakatoa, a volcanic island between Java and Sumatra, barely 5 miles long, resting in a busy sea. Then, in a matter of hours, it unleashed one of the most violent eruptions of the modern age. Sailors far out in the Indian Ocean swore that a naval battle had begun somewhere beyond the horizon. On Rodriguez Island, as far from the blast as London is from New York, families woke to the sound of cannon fire. But this was not a random catastrophe. Krakatoa had been warning the world for months. Almost nobody listened. For most of the 19th century, Krakatoa was thought to be long dormant. Nothing had stirred in 200 years. The Dutch, who ruled the East Indies, built ports along both coastlines. The strait was a highway of world trade. No one considered the mountain a threat. It was scenery, a green landmark that captains used to steer by. 25 miles across the water, in the town of Ketimbang, lived a Dutch official named Willem Beyerinck. He ran the small outpost with his wife Johanna and their children. From their veranda, they could see the volcano. In May 1883, the mountain woke up. Earthquakes rattled the region. Steam hissed from cracks in the northern slope. Ash dusted the nearby islands. Steamships sold tickets for excursions to the smoking crater. For many in the colony, the eruption was entertainment. After a few weeks, the activity faded. Officials assumed the worst was over. They were catastrophically wrong. Beneath the volcano, magma was rising and pressure was mounting. Seawater may have crept into the fractures above. If water met the magma, it would flash into steam. One more violent force inside an unstable mountain. Krakatoa was not going back to sleep. It was loading a weapon. Through June and July, the eruptions grew stronger. Ships pushed through pumice fields so thick they could barely move. Captains logged gray skies and a sun reduced to a pale disk. Ash fell on their decks like dirty snow. In Ketimbang, Willem Beyerinck watched the ash drift over his town and found it harder to believe the official calm. No evacuation followed. No effective warning reached the coast. Life on the shorelines went on as before. On the afternoon of August 26th, Krakatoa entered the final, catastrophic phase of its eruption. A column of ash climbed 20 miles into the stratosphere and spread into a black anvil over the strait. Inside the plume, volcanic lightning flickered without pause, strike after strike tearing through the darkness. By nightfall, explosions came every 10 minutes. The concussions could be felt through the hulls of ships. One British captain wrote that the eardrums of half his crew had been shattered by the blasts. Then he added a single line to his log. He was now convinced that the day of judgment had come. At 5:30 the next morning, the first of 4 colossal explosions tore the island apart. The blasts were heard in Singapore, in Perth, across thousands of miles of ocean, a wave moving at the speed of sound. Then, at 10 came the detonation the world would never forget. The northern 2/3 of Krakatoa ceased to exist as the mountain collapsed into the caldera forming below. The pressure waves circled the entire planet. Barometers in London, Berlin, and New York recorded the spike. Not once, 7 times. The atmosphere itself was ringing like a struck bell. Anyone still on the island would have been overwhelmed instantly by blast, heat, rock, and collapsing ground. Some modern estimates place the blast near 310 decibels, though no instrument measured it directly. At that intensity, sound stops being sound. It becomes a physical force, a wall of pressure that can kill. 2/3 of an island had just vanished into the sea. Now the displaced ocean would give its answer. First, along the shores of the strait, the sea drew back, a silence more terrifying than any roar. Then it returned as a wall. In places, the waves stood over 40 meters high, moving as fast as a train. At Merrick, the wave erased the town. Within minutes, almost nothing remained standing. The lighthouse at Anyir was ripped from its base. All that remained was a stump of shattered masonry. Across the strait at Teluk Betung, the wave tore the gunboat Baru from her moorings and hurled her 2 miles inland. When the water withdrew, the warship sat upright in a jungle clearing. None of her crew had survived. In the same town, the sea surged through homes without warning. Survivors recalled a screaming roar. One ship met the wave head-on. The steamer Loudon was anchored off Teluk Betung when the sea began to rise. Her captain made the only move that could save them. He turned the bow straight into the wall of water. The Loudon climbed the wave, hung at its crest, and slid down the far side. Behind her, the town was gone. But the sea was not the only killer that morning. Something else crossed the strait, riding on the water itself. A pyroclastic surge, gas and ash hotter than 500 degrees, likely riding the sea on a skin of steam. It crossed 25 miles of open water, a journey scientists would struggle to explain for a century. It came ashore at Ketimbang, the town of Willem Beyerinck. By the family's later account, they had fled uphill to a small hut as burning ash poured in through every gap. Johanna Beyerinck later described tearing scalding cinders from her skin, praying for the night to end. Around 1,000 people died at Ketimbang, killed not by water, but by heat that crossed the sea. The Beyerincks survived the night. Their youngest child died in the days that followed. Their story became one of the few surviving accounts from inside the cloud, testimony science still studies today. By nightfall on August 27th, the catastrophe had a shape. 165 villages destroyed. The official count listed 36,417 dead. The true toll was likely higher. Most were killed not by the eruption itself, but by the waves. Entire communities vanished in minutes. And Krakatoa was not finished. An estimated 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide had been hurled into the stratosphere. Combined with water vapor, it formed a veil of sulfate aerosols, a thin acid mirror wrapped around the Earth. The veil reflected sunlight back into space, cooling parts of the planet through the years that followed. Even a small shift was enough to bend weather patterns far beyond Indonesia. In places, harvests suffered. And then, all over the world, there was the light. For months, sunsets burned blood red, then violet, and observers reported blue and green suns hanging in the haze. In New York, fire brigades reportedly raced toward the glow on the horizon and found only the setting sun. In Norway, a young painter named Edvard Munch walked beside a fjord beneath one of those burning skies. A decade later, he painted The Scream. Some researchers believe its blood-red sky was born that winter. The ocean carried its own reminders. Rafts of floating pumice drifted west across the Indian Ocean for months. A year later, reports described rafts reaching Zanzibar, still afloat and still carrying human bones. The world had never experienced a disaster together before. Krakatoa changed that forever. The new global telegraph network carried the news to London and New York before the ash had even settled. For the first time, humanity learned of a catastrophe on the far side of the planet within hours, not months. In London, the Royal Society launched one of the most ambitious scientific studies of a disaster ever attempted. Barograph traces from around the world, sunset reports from hundreds of cities, tsunami maps of 2 coastlines. In the Indies, a Dutch geologist named Rogier Verbeek spent 2 years reconstructing the eruption in detail. His report became one of the founding works of modern volcanology. And it ended with a prediction. Verbeek wrote that one day, new eruptions would rise from the sea above the drowned caldera of Krakatoa. Krakatoa was the first eruption whose reach across the entire planet was measured, mapped, and understood. For 44 years, the sea over the caldera lay quiet. Then, in 1927, fishermen noticed steam rising from the water, exactly where Verbeek had pointed. By 1930, a new cone had broken the surface. Indonesians named it Anak Krakatau, the child of Krakatoa. Through repeated eruptions, the child rebuilt itself, growing, collapsing, and rising again above the caldera. In December 2018, its flank collapsed into the sea and sent a tsunami ashore without any warning. More than 400 people died along the coasts of Java and Sumatra. The child had drawn blood. Today, Anak Krakatau is watched around the clock. Seismometers, drones, satellites in constant orbit. Another eruption is certain. Whether it turns catastrophic, no one can say. So the watch never ends. And the stakes are no longer those of 1883. Millions now crowd the coastlines of the strait. Greater Jakarta, home to tens of millions of people, lies barely 100 miles from the volcano. Yet Krakatoa left more than fear. Within a year, green shoots were rising from the sterile ash. Within a decade, green had swept the fragments, and the birds were back. Life was reclaiming the broken island. The people returned too. Anyer, Merak, and Teluk Betung were rebuilt on the same shorelines. They fished the same waters and farmed the same soil in the shadow of the same volcano. Because humans rebuild. Memorials along the strait still mark the dead of 1883. They are not forgotten. But recovery never answered the question buried beneath the strait. Why was this eruption so violent? Scientists have weighed seawater and magma, trapped gas, magma mixing, the collapse itself, or all at once. The evidence explains much of the sequence, but no single mechanism yet explains every detail of that morning. For more of history's greatest cataclysms, the days the Earth became the enemy, subscribe to Echoes of Antiquity, because the planet is not finished with us. And in the Sunda Strait, the mountain is still alive.